Welcome again to another episode of Inside DevOps. My name is John Bristowe, your host, and joining me today is a friend of mine, Troy Hunt. Troy Hunt is an Australian web security consultant known for his public education around security topics, and you might know him better for his site, Have I Been Pwned, which we'll talk about in this discussion here. Have I Been Pwned is a data breach search website, allows users to see if their personally identifiable information has been compromised, and he's written tons of courseware for Pluralsight. He's done keynotes, presentations, workshops, etc. So he's well-versed in the security space. So I'm very happy to have him here to talk to me about all things around security, DevSecOps, etc. So thanks for taking the time to chat with me, Troy. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, hey, right. Thanks for having me. We haven't done this for a while, have we?
Yeah, I know.
Actually, have we ever done this? That may be why I feel that way.
Not virtually. Usually we just get together because Troy and I both live in the Gold Coast. So there you go. I'd like to start this interview with a very important question, Troy, and that is, it's basically one that I think that everyone has been thinking about and asking about lately, and that is, how is the barbecue at the moment?
The smoker. Oh, you should get in a niche. So I bought one of those pellet smokers for everyone's reference, which I'd always looked at for ages and ages and ages and thought, oh, this is going to be really, really cool one day. And you've got the whole thread up here, which is awesome. And eventually I succumbed because they had it in one of these butcher's shops. And every time I talked to the butcher, he'd be like, I've got one. I will show you how to use it. And in the back of his mind, he's going, you're going to buy a lot of meat from me if I sell you one of these. So we did that. Now, I noticed as you're scrolling through this, most of what you're seeing is not so much the awesome that we're cooking, but it's me struggling to get the barbecue connected and the firmware up to date. And I can report now that I still don't have it connected properly, and I can't get past version 1.3 of the firmware.
That's great. That's fantastic. I love it. So
I'm actually thinking of buying a new barbecue to fix it. Like, that's where we are at the moment.
That's hilarious. So I know that you've been dabbling lately in the space of IoT and connecting everything together. You post, all kinds of things around your house. Is the barbecue simply an extension of this journey that you're on to connect every single device on the planet?
Look, it's I feel like I'll give you a half serious answer. I think all the IoT stuff, it has to serve a purpose, and it can't be the primary reason for purchasing the thing. Now, you're on a shot just here of ribs smoking away. Now, that's the primary reason, right? Like, we just want to make epic food, and the food it has been making is just beautiful. And I'm getting hungry just looking at that. I think after I finish this, I'm going to go down to the super butcher and get some more ribs. But yeah, IoT to me, it has to add something. And for the barbecue, a lot of people look at this and they're like, okay, what's the point? Why do you connect your barbecue? So a few good reasons. Number one, it's a pellet smoker, so it consumes pellets. When the pellets run out, or when they get to a certain level, there's a sensor. You got to put more in, otherwise it doesn't work anymore. If I am here in my office, I cannot hear the beeping down there. I'd love to get a little push notification. Hey, go down and put some more pellets in. And number two, the other thing that's really useful is it has a meat probe, so it can report on the internal temperature of the meat. And for the smoking, a lot of the time you got no idea how long it needs to cook for. You're just waiting to get that temp. So getting a push notification when it gets to the temp is useful. And I've got an external thermometer from a company called Inkbird. I'm having different problems accessing that account for my tweets yesterday. But normally that works really good because I'm up here in the office and my phone's like, okay, I can see exactly what temperature up to 4 different probes are. And that is a good use case of IoT.
There you go. That's fantastic. It makes me feel good that you, of all people, are struggling with technology, because I know that I'm not alone. Whenever I struggle, I'm like, I have super imposter syndrome. I'm like, I don't deserve to be in this industry. And then someone as smart as you struggles with something like IoT. I'm like, oh, good, I'm not alone. This is fantastic. So that makes me feel good. So your pain is my. Go ahead.
I hear, and I think what I took from that is that you're enjoying my pain because it doesn't make you feel as bad. But I kind of look at it the other way insofar as, take the barbecue. The barbecue is a mass market consumer product. Yes. And I go, if this is like printers, right? So if I struggle to make the printer work, what's it like for everybody else? And it's such a weird, fragmented industry. So there's two things I'm buying at the moment, which I want to be IoT as part of our renovations here. So one is we're getting an awning out the back of our place because it's just too sunny this time of year to sit there in the morning. Now that's going to have a motor. It's going to have a remote control, and it's got its own app and its own walled ecosystem. And I would like to be able to lift up my watch and ask the lady whose name I can't mention, otherwise she starts talking and listening. I'd like her to put the awning down a little bit. And the other one is garage doors. Like, we're getting new garage doors. They'll have new motors. And that is the thing that took me down the IoT journey in the first place. I want to be able to like ride my bike home and ask the lady on my watch to open the garage door. And it's so hard even just to get straight answers about, is there any open API? Do you have a Home Assistant integration? And they're like, we've got an app. So, okay, great, another app.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting to watch the journey, that's for sure. So that's great. We should probably get a little bit more serious. That's one thing. So Have I Been Pwned has been around for a long time. I've been using it for, pretty much since you've launched it. So my son's got actually the Have I Been Pwned sticker on his PC. It's been around for a long time. It's a free resource. For those who don't know, this is at HaveIBeenPwned.com. It's a free resource for those who want to protect themselves against leaked credentials, potentially leaked personally identifiable information, etc. Since its launch back in 2013, it's grown, in my view, almost exponentially. You have partnerships with various companies and governments around the world, and folks using the site and its API all the time. They're using it all the time to basically protect themselves or be notified against breaches. And I'd like to start by asking you if you've ever envisioned the growth of Have I Been Pwned to the level that it is today.
No, I wouldn't have given it such a stupid name if I had known it would actually become useful. Because often people are like, why did you call it that? So, well, number one, I didn't think it would do anything. Number two, do you know how hard it is to get a domain name? Even in 2013, it was hard to get a domain name, at least on the .com TLD. So no, I certainly didn't expect that. And I think what's fascinating about it is, it'd be one thing to go and launch it, and it got popular within a few weeks. And that in itself was surprising. But the thing that I find very surprising is that the momentum has continued even through to today. And it was only, I guess it was about a year ago, we launched like the FBI ingestion pipeline, where the FBI, like the actual one, this is not an acronym for something else, but the real one that we all know from the movies, is feeding passwords into it, which is amazing. And all the government dependencies and other use cases. And there's always something interesting that's popping up from people in terms of ways to use it for the betterment of the world. And I did not expect that at all.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's been awesome, actually. As I said, I've been using it for a while. So I think in addition to being an excellent resource for users, security researchers, etc., the site itself is an excellent case study for Cloudflare and Azure. Can you talk a little bit about the technical aspects of the site?
Yeah, well, look, one of the reasons I created the service in the first place, I've always said it was sort of two equal reasons. Now, one of them was to create a data breach notification service. That's not surprising. But the other one was, as you know, I was working in big corp at the time at Pfizer, and I really wanted to drive them down a cloud, let's call it a cloud first world. So we were having things like virtual machines at ISPs, which was literally just virtualization of all the hard metal that would run in the data center. I really wanted to drive them down a path where we had things like PaaS. Like PaaS is amazing because we abstract ourselves away from the underlying infrastructure and all the things that were good about it. And in order to do that, I wanted to have firsthand experience. I had an architecture role where you basically draw diagrams. You don't actually build software. And I wanted to actually build things in anger. And having the Adobe data breach with 150 million plus records, I went, okay, this is cool. This is a great big corpus of data. I can build something on there. So it was always a cloud first project. And all that's happened over time is we just sort of picked more and more different cloud bits that have done things better than the old cloud bits, and it's gradually matured.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like, one of the things that I like a lot is the fact that you're pretty transparent with the way that the site has grown, and you're even sharing, your costs and how Cloudflare and Azure has, saved you a ton of money. And I think learning in public is a huge thing for a lot of folks out there. And I think that it's to a credit that you've done that. And I think a lot of people don't realize just how hammered the site gets. Like you're constantly servicing requests via your API through people who are reading it. Anytime I see it, you'll tweet me once in a while, like, hey, we're mentioned on the Swedish news channel for nightly news, etc. And you show the charts, etc. It's awesome to see. So Yeah, that's fantastic. So talking a little bit more about that. So in addition, so like NTLM, New Technology LAN Manager, I think it is. It's a suite of security program. I'm testing my neuron. My neurons are firing off right now. So it's a suite of security protocols, if I remember correctly, offered by Microsoft, and it's used to authenticate users. And essentially, it's like enabling like single sign-on. And there's a challenge response protocol, etc. So back in August 2018, Have I Been Pwned added the ability to search NTLM hashes. And more recently, you've added support for NTLM to the firehose. Can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on there?
Well, if we scroll back to what pwned passwords is, because it also stems from there. One of the things that I was getting asked a lot by people is they said, look, have I been pwned? You can go and you can search for email addresses, but we would like to know if a credential pair has been compromised. So we want to check, let's say when our customers log on, are they using a username and a password for another data breach? Because obviously that would present a high risk to account takeover on the other service. And it was a valid question, but no way at all am I ever going to put credential pairs in this service. I say that, no foreseeable way. I have no plans. I think it's a massive risk. I don't like the responsibility of sitting on credential pairs. And around about the same time, there was a lot of guidance coming from NIST in particular about trying to move away from archaic measures of password strength and authentication. So they were saying, look, that thing where you say you must have an uppercase character, so everyone just capitalizes the first letter, probably doesn't work so well because everyone just capitalizes the first letter, and the hackers have worked that out. So let's stop doing that and start doing things like blocking known bad passwords from previous breach corpuses. And I went, oh, this is interesting because I have a lot of passwords from previous breach corpuses. So I put together, I think at the time it was only about 250 million passwords. And I went, all right, well, here's the corpus. Now, I don't want to put them in plain text and then give them to everybody for a couple of reasons. Number one, hackers don't always do a good job of parsing their data. And sometimes when I think I've got a password, I might have an entire row from a database line. It could be someone's name and address and phone number and everything else. So that's PII. So that was your first problem. Now, number two is sometimes legitimately people put PII in their passwords. Like they make their password their email address or something stupid like that. So I didn't want to give it in plain text. And I went, all right, well, let's just hash it. So I just SHA-1'd every single password and went, okay, you can just download all the SHA-1 hashes, which is not how we'd store passwords in a normal transactional system these days, but as a means of obfuscation of the underlying data, where you can still take a plain text password and hash it with SHA-1 and compare it. And if they match, we know it's the same thing. That was a good way to do things. So I put that out there. I made it a downloadable corpus. I put an API there so you could search for it, and that worked well. And then it just evolved from there, where there's people obviously liked it because it helped answer or satisfy rather the NIST requirement. I mean, NIST said don't use known bad passwords. Good luck. Now you need to go and find known bad passwords. So it helped fill that gap. And then Cloudflare came along and said, look, we got this implementation of an anonymity model, which is called k-anonymity. And what you do is you take your SHA-1 hash and you take the first 5 characters and you allow people to search for that. And then you return every suffix, so the last 35 characters.
Yes.
And if you join them together and any one of them matches your entire hash, well, then you know it's been in the breach. And you can do this by only disclosing a fragment of a hash. And if you do the mathematics on it, the ability for that to tell you what password is actually being searched for is effectively useless. And everyone can easily understand it too, because it's not some weird cryptographic concept. Like I've just explained it in one sentence. So that was cool. So we did that, and then we put an API on it. And I'm just trying to find my stats at the moment because every time I look at this, it's like everything is really different in terms of volumes. But we put that out originally, and it started to get used quite a bit, which was really, really good. And now, according to my stats, in the last 30 days, there's been 2.87 billion requests to this k-anonymity service on Cloudflare, where that's just the first 5 characters sent to the thing. Which is amazing. So, we're touching on 3 billion requests a month, and you can still go and download it all locally if you want to run it locally, if you don't want to do the online thing. And to your point about NTLM, we still use NTLM for hashing passwords within Active Directory. And there's a lot of people that said, look, we would like to be able to check our internal Active Directory infrastructure against pwned passwords. And because NTLM, as it's used in AD, doesn't salt the hashes, and there's a whole other story that smarter Microsoft people than me can explain, it means that if you have a corpus of NTLM hashes, you can compare that to your Active Directory environment. So we pushed out NTLM hashes as well, and just last week, actually, we made sure that you can query the API via NTLM hashes, and you can now download all the ones that the FBI sends. So I don't know how many people use it because they download it, but it seems to be popular, which is good.
That's fantastic. I'm jumping around a little bit because I wanted to cover a lot of stuff, obviously. Can you tell viewers a little bit about password Purgatory?
I saw that tab on your browser just before. I was
waiting. I was just queuing it up. So there you go.
So it has nothing to do with Have I Been Pwned, and it's basically satisfying my need to mess with people that waste my time, namely spammers. So so many of the things I've created or written were basically like, something is upsetting me. I'm going to get a bee in my bonnet about this and try and not necessarily fix the problem, but feel better about the fact that there is a problem. So that the thing that I kept getting really bugged by is I'd get all these emails from people saying, hi, do you accept guest posts on your blog? How much? We would like to write about men's shavers. Like, no, delete. And I just got bugged by it. So I was like, all right. The right way to do this is I have to waste their time, and I have to figure out how to waste as much time as possible. And I was thinking about the NIST thing I mentioned earlier about the password complexity criteria, and how many times you go to a website and they've just got like stupid criteria, like you can't have 2 consecutive characters, or you can't have an angle bracket in your password, or just something screwy. And I was like, that bugs the hell out of me. Let's build that. Okay, so let's build something with ridiculous, arbitrary password complexity criteria that get increasingly crazy. And the next time I get an email saying, we would like to publish on your blog, I'll go, well, that sounds like a good idea. Just go and register over here. And they have to then try and satisfy the password complexity criteria. And I mean, you got it open here, so you can start typing whatever you want. And this is sort of the same problem with getting domain names. I wanted to call it password hell, but passwordhell.com is gone. So I went to the thesaurus, and now it's password purgatory, which is actually kind of neat. So you go there and say, okay, you got to have at least one number. Now we see this all the time. So you go, okay, put a number in. Can't end with 1, which is what you've done. So no naughty, take that out. It's got to be an even length. And it just increasingly gets bizarre. And some of the times the criteria is contradictory. Now, to make it more fun and to learn some things myself and help other people learn some stuff, I put it all on Cloudflare Workers. I did it all the right way with Wrangler and then GitHub Actions to deploy it all. Made it 100% open source, partly so that everyone else gets access to it, and partly so other people do the work for me, which is good. And people just started contributing crazy criteria. Some of the ones I enjoy the most is it'll be questions or criteria like your password must end with the word dog. Now, what makes it even more fun, it's like it's one thing to waste the time of people who have wasted your time and spammed you. It's another thing to share their misery with everybody else. So all the password attempts are logged. They don't get tied to an IP or to the email address that they entered when trying to create an account. But after someone messes with me, I get a little notification going, hey, you've hooked a spammer. 15 minutes after they've been hooked, I don't log anything more just in case they come back and put PII in. But then there's a URL, and I can share that URL on Twitter, and we can all sort of go, look at these guys. So the password purgatory hashtag on Twitter is just full of quality examples, as recently as this morning, of spammers struggling.
Love it. This is hilarious. We need more of this, I think. Good stuff.
And it's funny, like even looking at the logo, I just get so infatuated with stuff. It's like, I want a logo that looks like flames. And so I blew like a day trying to figure out how to do flames in Photoshop. I have important stuff to do in my life, but I
know. This is important though.
How do I make this look like it's on fire? And there goes my day.
I love it. So kind of related to that, I know you've spoken repeatedly and at great length about breach, and I know that here in Australia, where you and I are, we've had a number of recent breaches. Some of which have been handled with care and humility, and others that have been handled with like arrogance and almost disrespect for the general public. Looking more globally, we've had numerous breaches, like the ones you've blogged about and protected customers against with Have I Been Pwned? And I'm wondering if we'll ever get to a point where breaches are shared and discussed in the open, at least to the level that's required for an order of transparency to win the day, so to speak. Do you think that we're on the right path, or do you think, are you even more discouraged than ever before when it comes to those breaches?
I think there's an interesting set of different measures. So in terms of the measure of transparency, I do feel it's getting better for a few reasons. One of them is that we're getting better penalties with more teeth. I mean, obviously GDPR has been around for a few years now. I'm yet to see anyone get hit with the full sort of 4% of gross annual worldwide turnover sort of penalty, but there's a lot more awareness, there's a lot more formality around disclosure. In Australia, you didn't mention names, but obviously Octopus and Medibank for the Aussies here. As a result of that, we've seen penalties increase to, it's either 50 million Australian dollars, which is about, what's that, 5 cents US or something?
5 cents.
I don't know where we are now. I'm just glad I get paid in US dollars most of the time.
Yep.
No, look, it's probably about, what, 30 million plus US dollars. Or it's a weird measure. It's like a third of your normalized quarterly, I don't know, whatever it is. But it's a lot of money. So we're seeing that come through. But I guess the other thing is that we're normalizing data breaches a bit more. If you think back to, I'm just preparing a talk right in front of me at the moment. I've got some stuff about Ashley Madison 8 years ago. Compared to then, I think that the acceptance of the fact that data breaches happen and they're a more, I was going to say normal, but probably a more common part of our online life, it probably takes a little bit of the stigma away. Now, having said that, on my other screen, I'm basically at the point where I'm just going to disclose anyway for this particular company because they don't want to disclose themselves. And we still have this problem where there is a reticence, and it's particularly more prevalent in some cultures as well. And you and I can get into the weeds of that over some beer sometime. But there's obviously a reticence among many organizations to disclose. Even the more mainstream ones. I mean, I got an email from a class action lawyer just yesterday about Deezer. So that the Deezer streaming service, Deezer had tens of millions of people in this data breach. They notified the regulator. They never notified anyone in the breach. They have still not reached out and actually told Deezer customers that your data was compromised. Now, out of that tens of millions of people, there were hundreds of thousands of Have I Been Pwned subscribers. So I sent emails to every single one of them. So they know about it. But why is it my job to tell people that this other massive organization lost their data? That's just crazy.
Right. I wanted to switch gears again. I'm going on 10. I want to cover a lot of stuff with you because I've only got you for a certain amount of time. But so DevSecOps is something I wanted to talk to you a little bit about because obviously it pertains to a lot of the viewers of this video. So it's basically the practice for those who haven't heard of the term or haven't applied it. It's the practice of integrating security within continuous integration, continuous delivery, the continuous deployment pipeline. And the idea is that by incorporating it at various stages, taking security as a feature with verification and being able to be integrated about that deployment process, you get increased security as a whole. I'd like to know your opinion about DevSecOps. Like, I know that you're a strong advocate for practices like hacking yourself first, etc. And when you talk to developers about security best practices, I have a few questions. Like, are you encouraged by what you're seeing in the industry? An important aspect of this is obviously education. But when you're talking to that, are you encouraged by what you're seeing people do around the space of DevSecOps in particular?
Well, I guess if we look at the sort of the evolution of all this, we started seeing a lot of CI/CD in our industry. For me, a lot of my recollection of that is probably around the late noughties. And I remember going through the process of setting up CI with Team City in my days at Pfizer. And that until that point, we just simply didn't have it running. There's a bunch of blog posts about that, actually. And then, of course, the security folks started getting very concerned because they're like, well, hang on, you're continually pushing stuff out without going through our processes. Now, at Pfizer, as with many other organizations, security was the thing you did at the end. Like quite literally, every time we could build anything from a Viagra marketing campaign through to a clinical trial management system or an adverse event reporting system. They're just some of the examples that came to mind. The entire thing would get built, and then right at the end, they go, oh, yeah, we'll just go and check the security now. So they had a process that was totally inefficient to begin with. And this was around the time we started getting a lot of this sort of push left sentiment, like bring security forward in the SDLC, the software development lifecycle rather than the secure development lifecycle.
Yes.
And then this sort of DevOps stuff comes along, and they're like, well, but that skips the other bit because we're meant to do the thing. But I think we've sort of, as we've matured, we've just gained an awareness that many of the things that we can automate in software development, we can also automate with security. We can do things like, one of the things I wrote early on was integrating dynamic analysis into nightly builds. So let's start doing security analysis every single night. It doesn't fix all your problems, but it brings security much further forward, and it gives us much more confidence if we want to make lots of smaller iterative changes that we can analyze security as we go along. And I think that's something that's only continued in the decade plus since.
Yeah, that's good. I think you're right. Obviously, an important aspect of that is like the understanding of security and making kind of like a feature during the software development process. And of course, an aspect of that is education. You've published a great deal of resources and courses on Pluralsight to educate developers about best practices and processes surrounding the area of security. How are your courses doing? Are you seeing an increase in views, over time, etc.?
It's interesting. The way Pluralsight works is they pay you based on a combination of how much your stuff is viewed, the proportion of everything else, and then the revenue. And all I really know about Pluralsight is they keep sending me checks, which is nice because I haven't done anything. Something's got to pay for these barbecues, mate. I haven't done anything with Pluralsight for a few years now. Of course, technology does date. You're having a bit of a spin through there. There's a lot of things like, geez, the first courses I did were on the OWASP 2010 version. That still gets a lot of views. The Hack Yourself First course I did, I think that was 2013, still gets a lot of views. So it's been great that people are still interested in this content many, many, many years on. And it's a bit of a shame I haven't done more, but it is a laborious task, shall we say.
You're not a robot. Come on. What are we talking about here? So anyway, staying with the theme of education, the rate of change in the security space, I think, is increasing faster. And it's actually, I think, more than other areas of software development. Like, I liken the pace of change in security with that of like web development. Like, everything is changing so fast. And yet, in general, I find that if you apply some of the best practices that you've espoused in your courses and in your teachings, etc., that generally speaking, you'll be okay. And so outside of your Twitter account and blog posts and Pluralsight videos, how can a developer stay up to date on everything that's changing in this space? And how do you stay current in the security space?
Because it's 2023, you've got to say, go to my Mastodon account. There's another topic altogether. I do have a Mastodon account, infosec.exchange/Troy Hunt. Look, for me, I guess by virtue of having a bunch of people out there that follow me, I get a lot of people tweeting at me. So a lot of the way I stay up to date is I get up early in the morning and I sit outside in my soon-to-be IoT'd awning location, and I literally just pick up the iPad and I go through my Twitter feed. And there's a lot of stuff in there that people mention to me. When I say I go through my Twitter feed, I'm normally just going through the mentions, if I'm completely honest, which is a bit of a lazy way, but I've got a good audience. A lot of people, raise really interesting things. The one newsletter I subscribe to is Risky Business News from Patrick Gray, and I listen to his podcast as well. I get a lot of stuff from that. So whenever I'm out driving, usually on my own, it's like, okay, podcast, I'll catch up on that. I guess I go to some conferences. It's a little bit different these days, isn't it? I feel like even though some people don't like saying post-COVID, but even though we're like mostly back to normal, I probably go to less events. But I speak to a huge number of companies, we mentioned the accelerative rate of Have I Been Pwned before. There's so many times I have conversations, probably every single day. I have multiple conversations, be they video like this or phone calls or emails, about the way people are using the technology, and I learn different things there as well. So I think that's really cool. I had a meeting with the company yesterday. They're like, look, we want to use Have I Been Pwned as an indicator of someone's age, not like the age of their account, but are they an adult or not? Because their presence in certain classes of website is one signal out of many as to whether or not they're an adult or a child. So okay,
right.
that's actually a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yep. There are various ISVs that are getting increasingly active in this space. So companies like GitHub are providing security features for workloads, like in GitHub Actions, for example. Sneak has its pitch, finding automatically fix vulnerabilities in your code, open source dependencies, containers, infrastructure as code. There are others like Auth0 that take care of the challenge of implementing authentication and login screens. And this doesn't even mention some of the work that's done by folks like your friend Scott Helm and the resources like Report URI, etc., security headers. What's on your radar recently that's impressed you or grabbed your attention as a developer? Is there a vendor or a product that you feel deserves more attention from the developer community around the space of security?
I think I'd answer that more in terms of a pattern. I think we're just finally starting to see good alternatives to passwords, things like pass keys, like the ability to say, well, look, my device is going to have a key on it that's just going to log me in without all the plumbing and mess that we normally deal with. As much as passwords have been a big part of everything I've done, and I'm on 1Password's board of advisors as well, which is kind of funny because they want to sort of get to the point where we kill passwords as well, right? It's not to say that 1Password won't be a thing anymore once we no longer have passwords. But going down that path, and a bunch of that includes things like FIDO2 and other implementations that are open industry standards, as opposed to one bloke's interpretation of a QR code that you scan and then it's a really, really good technical thing and please give me money now. Like the open standard stuff, I think is really, really good. And you've got the screen up here from Steve saying, goodbye passwords. So that's great. Like that is the direction that we want to head. We're just trying to find the way to do it where people like my mum and dad can still actually log on to things.
Okay. Yeah. Increasingly, you're seeing a number of companies adopt this area of what I like to call crowdsourcing their security through managed programs like bug bounties and the like. Yeah. Are you a fan of those? Do you have any advice for a company looking to institute a bug bounty? And have you seen what works and more importantly, what doesn't work in cases of bug bounties?
So this is like literally the slides in front of me at the moment of give everyone a sneak verbal peek of what I'm doing. I'm actually doing a talk for the Australian Superannuation Fund next week, which for folks in other parts of the world, this is like your, 401ks, retirement stuff. So for the most part, not the sexiest of industries. So I'm trying to figure out how to make it interesting. But we're talking about things that members of this association should be aware of. So folks that might go back to their own managed retirement savings company and have to talk to the people in there about how do we secure ourselves. And the way that we do disclosure and the openness of companies to disclosure is a massive topic. So we sort of got onto this by talking about bug bounties. One thing that a bug bounty does, if you forget about the money and the incentive and everything for a moment, is it signals very, very clearly to the public that we recognize that there can be security incidents and we'd like to know about it. Now, we'll also give you some money if you find it. But there are other ways of doing this even without bug bounty. And in fact, the bits I've got in my slides here is things like a security.txt file. So there is a spec which says in the .well-known directory, if you put a security.txt file, which is like a robots, and you explain in that spec, here is how to get in touch with us. Here's our security address. Here's our public key if you want to encrypt stuff. There might be hiring stuff. And, in this example slides here, it's like, okay, here's Google's, here's the BBC's, here's realestate.com.au. They were just the biggest Aussie site that has one. Here's Have I Been Pwned? And then the point I'm trying to make, because I'm going to talk about things like Octopus, which we spoke about just before, that got very breached. When they got not just a bit breached, very breached. When they got breached, one of the things that the attacker said, who dumped a bunch of their data on a public forum, is they said, we couldn't get in touch with you. So you go to Optus and you go to look at the .well-known/security.txt, and you get 404. So, okay, so even after you've been breached and people said we had trouble getting in touch with you, you're still not even implementing the standard. And then there are things like there are, what's the right word? Vulnerability disclosure document. I forget the name of it now. Anyway, Tesla has a great one. It's basically a page which says, here is the way to disclose to us. And it includes things like, here's the email address to send to. Please avoid or make a good faith attempt not to access personal data. Please give us time to fix the problem before you talk about it publicly. And all of these things are like totally reasonable. And you sort of go, well, okay, why can't we do that? Responsible disclosure guidelines. There you go. So that can be done without having to give people money. Now, I do like the bug bounty idea. I think it's fraught with problems, which is why I really like the idea of someone like BugCrowd. So BugCrowd has managed bug bounty programs. HackerOne's very popular as well. So, pay someone else to run the program for you. But particularly for larger organizations that are a target, like let's get people doing the right thing, incentivizing them to do so, and signaling publicly that we do want you to tell us if you find a problem.
Right. And this is going to go left field, but there you go. Recently, AI, via the release of ChatGPT, has entered front and center in the conversation about everything and anything related to software. And I'm curious to know, have you had a chance to play around with ChatGPT? And do you have any thoughts? Do you have any thoughts about tools like ChatGPT that may help or /harm the security space around software development?
Yes, I would like to do an AI version of Password Purgatory. That's high on my priority list. And I did a manual demo of this recently where I had LinkedIn spam. I get LinkedIn spam all the time. And I just kept going to ChatGPT and asking it to respond to the person. And every response I gave them was a ChatGPT response,
yep.
Which I shared extensively publicly to much hilarity. And I got to the point where it's like, I'm getting bored of this. The guy keeps wanting to talk to me. And I asked ChatGPT, please give me an excuse for why I can't talk to this person, and Crocodile Dundee theme it. And it gave me an answer. And I said, please make it more Australian. And they gave me another answer. And I was like, okay, that one's great. I'll give it to him. And then he got upset. So that was a win. There we go. You found it already.
Yep.
That was hilarious. Look, I think the whole space is fascinating. One of the questions that keeps coming up a lot is, okay, well, what can we do with AI in general as defenders? And, there's a lot we can do there. I think being a little bit cautious that the term AI tends to get overused a lot. Yeah. Just things like user behavioral analytics, which we've had around for years. Companies like Varonis do a lot of good UBA. Normally Joe logs into the sales department from the office in Sydney and he accesses sales documents. One day, Joe logs in with the correct username and password from Beijing and pulls down 5 terabytes of marketing data. All right, well, maybe not Joe. Using intelligence like that is so much more efficient in so many ways. And then the bit that makes it really fun is that everyone gets access to AI. So the bad guys get access to AI as well. So they can get increasingly intelligent in the things that they do. And it brings us back to this moral neutrality of technology again. It's like, yes, AI is amazing. We can do wonderful things with it. We can also have terrible things done to us using the same technology.
Gotcha. Yeah. Again, switching gears and talk a little bit about programming languages now. What is your programming language of choice these days?
Look, I mean, if I sit down and write code, it's normally going to be C#. It's just the thing that I've got the last 20 years spending time in now. It's not as good as what I think it should be. My interpretation of it or my implementation of it. Other places I spend time, obviously I spend time in JavaScript. I seem to end up in handlebars a lot, whether it's Ghost template. I was doing some stuff with Zendesk the other day.
Oh, okay.
YAML, because I'm living in Home Assistant. Now, someone's going to say, oh, they're not programming languages, they're markup. Whatever. Sure. It looks like code. I think the sort of the nice thing about the environment now is that there are lots of different languages you end up with. TypeScript's been doing a bunch of Cloudflare worker stuff in TypeScript. And I think what's probably more important than any one language is an acceptance of there are a bunch of different things out there. My son's been doing a bunch of Python as he starts to learn. I think it's probably one of the easiest ways for kids to get started. And then there'll be a whole bunch of other things I haven't even heard of that I probably should be doing, and I feel like I'm behind again.
I know. It's you can't win. I asked the question because it was a bit of a setup for something that I want to just briefly mention, which is I'm seeing you see all these surveys like on Stack Overflow and the state of the Octoverse, and you see that Rust is continually at the top of the list as one of the most loved languages, and it's recently gotten really popular as of late. And the reason why, well, part of the reason why, performance is touted, but the second reason is because it has this strong typing system that's super memory safe and type safe and thread safe. You eliminate a lot of those runtime bugs that you'll see, and compile times bugs as well. Have you researched statically typed languages like Rust for their security related claims, or do you have any thoughts in general about languages like this?
No, look, I hear a bunch about Rust. Obviously, these are all higher level languages that are meant to abstract away a lot of the security concerns about things like memory corruption, whatever else it may be.
Yep.
Yeah, look, I keep hearing about Rust, but I couldn't look at code and say that's Rust. So that's how rusty I am.
I like
there
it.
You go.
That's awesome. I'm personally a huge advocate of security tools. It's along that line of, the tools for hacking yourself first, and the breadth and depth of security focused tools for developers, I think, is massive. And it's gotten so prevalent now that you see like fuzzing capabilities built into the tooling for programming languages like Go. In your opinion, is it getting easier or harder for software to become like generally compromised? Like, what I mean by that, are there new tools available for developers that you'd recommend that developers investigate or consider as part of their development practices? Like, is there any, like, what I'm trying to ask is, like, there's no more excuse now to really be compromised in a massive way because the tooling's there. But is there anything like in terms of tooling that I mentioned Scott Helm's like report URI and security headers and the tools that you have? Are there other tools around that with developers that you would recommend?
Well, I think first of all, it is a very constantly changing landscape. If we think back to, let's say, a decade ago, we would see a lot more cross-site scripting because we didn't have native output encoding in a lot of languages. We'd see a lot more SQL injection because we weren't using as many RRMs. In fact, on both those, probably got to go back a decade and a half. So problems like that we start to solve. Cross-site request forgery, well, we've got anti-forgery tokens that just magically appear now in a lot of these languages. But then we have different problems. I suspect we have a lot more configuration-related problems now because it's so easy to spin up cloud services. How many data breaches Have I Been Pwned? Because there's an S3 bucket that's been left open or something like that.
Yep.
And then, of course, we start to see tooling around that. So, better ability to look at what the total exposure of our infrastructure is, and is everything locked down properly, or are we using weak credentials on these things, or do we have our second factor authentication, so on and so forth. So I think all of this stuff just like we seem to get better at something and everyone goes, oh, okay, that's the next bad bit, and then we move on to there, and then we create fixes for that, and then we cycle on to the other thing, which keeps it interesting.
Fuzzing, this in terms of articles, this one caught my attention recently. I don't know if you saw this, but they did an audit of the curl library, which is, for folks who don't know, curl is like a very simple library that allows you to hit basically an endpoint and grab the HTML document for an endpoint itself. And what they decided to do, all these are classic, like the sort of the motivation for this was clearly around beers, and they're like, what if we tried to curl this, for example? And what they ended up doing is they actually generated a bunch of CVEs because of some basic fuzz testing that they hadn't conducted. And so these were CVEs that were discovered in the curl that were announced in the curl library itself. And so they talk a little bit about fuzzing and utilizing tools like that and kind of finding these exploits. So I'm a big fan of this, but these stories seem to pop up all the time. I don't know if you have any tools that you'd recommend in that space.
Well, obviously, Have I Been Pwned is a really good one.
Yeah.
Make sure don't use bad passwords. Report URI from Scott Helm. Actually, Report URI is actually a really good example where Report URI takes advantage of the fact that your browser can natively report security violations on a website. So things like, if you have a content security policy and then someone is starting to embed scripts from another location, which we've seen happen many times before, mage cart style attacks, it can like literally send reports to Scott's service here, and you can go through and see that there's funny things happening with your site. And I love this because it's natively built into the browser. And when I talk about things like CSPs, sort of say to people, like, look at how many security products out there that you can spend huge amounts of money on. And here is one that is in your browser and it's free. And if I could encourage people to do anything, is to like understand the free stuff that's in there. CSPs are great. Sub-resource integrity is great. Being able to make sure that an external JavaScript dependency hasn't changed from a known good state, that's there for free. Start there and then start doing the things that you spend a bit more money on.
Yep. Love it. Now this is going to be one that I don't expect you to answer, but it is one of my more technical ones. What advice do you have developers using cryptography? Is there like, and I'm going to go total nerd here, but like, is there a key length that you would suggest using? Is there an algorithm that you prefer that folks would lean towards? Do you care about this? Or are you like me and you think like, look, this is pretty mathematical and intense. I'm not going to pretend to be the expert here. Just tell me what algo to use and I'll go with that. Or do you enjoy reading about them from time to time?
So the thing that is always said about cryptography, in fact, several things are always said. Number one, like never roll your own.
Yep.
And related to that is the saying that everybody can create an encryption scheme that they themselves can't break. So, it's the number of times I have seen, and in fact, I've used this a bunch of my talks. Things like I remember one where there was some online training, and it's like write an encryption scheme using base 64. So hang on a second. Even just fundamental misunderstandings of
Sure.
what is encryption, what is hash. How many times we see data breach like we encrypted your passwords with MD5? Hang on a second. There are multiple problems with this statement. I think that a good way of thinking about it is to always defer to native libraries. So if there are native libraries to do it, obviously encryption, like the proper encryption, not the base 64 encoding encryption, or if there are native libraries to do things like authentication and state persistence and things like that. There's a bunch of cryptography involved there. Defer to those. If it's key links, defer to industry standards. If it's things like cryptographic certificates like we would have for TLS, I like to defer those to Cloudflare and let them take care of it. Or defer it to Let's Encrypt. There's not a lot of mucking around that you do down in the weeds there. I don't really want to go through the mechanics of choosing key links and things like that.
I read these reports about hash collisions and stuff, and people are freaking out about it. And I'm like, I kind of just shrug my shoulders. I'm like, look, I don't have the time, nor like not, and I'll be honest, I don't have the inclination either to really care about this. But like, people freak and lose their minds about it. I'm just, do you find yourself that, or do you just kind of be like, oh, that's it? You kind of shrug your shoulders and like, yeah, that's interesting, and just keep moving on?
Well, I think it's a bit more of the latter. Like it's interesting. I do like to understand what it is. I mean, something like a hash collision is not too hard to understand. Why it matters is probably a bit more important. But then, let's take, for example, hash collisions in SHA-1 that was used as signatures on certificates. The industry collectively said, okay, that's not really good anymore. We need to go to a stronger hashing algorithm. And everyone just goes, okay, seems reasonable. And we move on to that.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely the case there. So, all right. So, just gonna wrap up now with a couple of other questions. So, what are you focused on these days? Like you blog and you tweet a lot about, a variety of things. I know that you're, renovating your house and doing Internet of Things and barbecues and all that sort of stuff. But on the security front, like what's got your attention, or what are you super interested in?
It's sort of a fascinating life at the moment. I honestly, for the most part, just get up each day and work out what I'm going to do at the time. And other than having events that I've committed to, there's a backlog of things I want to do with Have I Been Pwned. There are a whole
Anything
bunch
you
of
want to
things
share with us on this video?
Well, I mean, one of the things, less about sort of features and code and everything else, is just getting it to the point of greater sustainability. And I mean, this is another good sort of beer discussion as well. But at the moment, it's like if I go out there and get taken by a bull shark, like who runs Have I Been Pwned? I'm increasingly conscious of the importance of succession planning and sustainability as it becomes more important to everybody else. And the only way that happens is you've got to get more people involved. And then if you start doing that, well, it becomes more complex. So there's definitely things afoot there. And that's sort of, to me, the bigger picture. And then as part of that, there are definitely features and things like that I want to build. but I need people to help me do that because I've got barbecues to fix, things like that, right? So, but there's also a luxury at the moment where I get to choose as much or as little as I want to do with it, and I've got a whole box of freebies that a company sent me that look really, really cool here on the floor, and I'll probably start tweeting about that today. And it has absolutely nothing to do with InfoSec, and it will not improve my life in any meaningful way, but it looks so cool. It looks really fun.
Course.
I'll show you when we stop recording. So, I just I've got to finish this presentation by close of business today. And I think after I've done that, it's like, I'll pick up the cool tech stuff and I'll start playing with that.
Yeah. Oh, well, who can blame you? Last question. Looking ahead to the future, are you optimistic about the state of software development as it pertains to security? Like, on one hand, I could see why being pessimistic would be great for you, like more Pluralsight views, right? More training, etc. But on the other hand, I'm sure you want the industry as a whole to be a better place moving forward.
I'm optimistic that it's a very good time for me to be in the industry.
Okay. You can read that two ways.
I think I do think that everything gets better. It gets better. Like, something that immediately came to mind. iOS devices being able to use security keys now as a second factor in getting encryption from the client side end to end for things like your photos. Now, that poses some risks as well, but hey, isn't that cool? It's like we can now have confidence that Tim Cook can't go and look at our personal photos, or the FBI can't go and compel someone to hand them over. So stuff like that, I think, improves. Like we mentioned, pass keys before as well. All of that's moving in a good direction. At the same time, I would argue that we've probably never seen more ransomware of just really, really nasty kinds. I mentioned Medibank before, this Australian private health insurer, where the ransomware crew literally just started dropping files of, here's the people that have had abortions, here's the people with mental health issues. And it's like, geez, what on earth is this? And we're seeing a lot of that in different ways. And that I just find is I mean, where do you even begin with that? So, it moves, it continually moves. And that's also part of what makes it interesting, right? Like it's never static. And I'll get up tomorrow and I'll sit out there and look at my iPad and go, oh, what, Jesus, I didn't see that coming. That's new. And I find that exciting.
Okay. Hey, Troy, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me. I always learn something new when I talk to you. So thanks again. And hopefully I'll be able to stop by your house and maybe have a steak or something on your new barbecue.
Absolutely. Anytime, man.